What if the pandemic we've all been battling was handled differently by the world leaders? How did Putin's government manage this crisis? Imagine a world where politics and public health intertwine so deeply that every decision becomes a high-stakes gamble. This is the world we've found ourselves in, and today, we're focusing on the role of Putin's government during the COVID-19 pandemic. From the outset, it's been a journey fraught with controversy, criticisms, and a fair share of geopolitical tensions. So, let's delve into the chronological series of events to better understand the actions of Putin's government during the pandemic. As the pandemic began to sweep across the globe, Russia's response was initially no different from many other nations. The government, under President Vladimir Putin, took the necessary steps that mirrored actions seen worldwide. Borders were shut, and lockdown measures were swiftly put in place, creating an eerie quiet in cities that are usually bustling with life. Yet, even in these early days, there were indications that Putin's government was not fully acknowledging the severity of the situation. The virus was initially dismissed as a minor concern, a distant threat that would not significantly impact the vast expanse of Russia. It was a narrative that seemed to prioritize political stability over public health, an approach that would later draw criticism both domestically and internationally. During this time, Putin's government also focused on maintaining a sense of normality. Despite the rising numbers, life was encouraged to go on as usual, with the government even going as far as promoting the idea that Russia was better equipped to handle the crisis than other nations. This narrative, however, would later prove to be far from the truth, as the virus continued to spread and the death toll began to rise. In these early days, the Russian government's response to the pandemic was marked by a sense of denial and a desire to maintain control. It was a tactic that, while initially providing a sense of stability, would sow the seeds of doubt and mistrust as the situation worsened. However, as the pandemic progressed, the response from Putin's government began to diverge from the global norm. As cases began to rise, the actions of Putin's government raised eyebrows both domestically and internationally. The government's approach to handling the pandemic was seen as controversial, with critics accusing it of prioritizing political stability over the health and well-being of its citizens. One such controversial decision was Putin's response to the jailing of Kremlin critic Alexei Navalny. Amidst the health crisis, the Kremlin chose to focus its resources on suppressing dissent rather than managing the pandemic. Navalny's arrest, followed by the detention of his allies, drew international attention and criticism. Another contentious decision was the downplaying of the severity of the virus. While other nations were implementing strict lockdown measures and ramping up testing, Russia appeared to be in a state of denial. The government's reluctance to impose stringent measures like staying-at-home orders or mass testing was seen as a gamble. The government's handling of the pandemic was not just criticized domestically. Internationally, there was concern over Russia's lack of transparency concerning the virus's impact on its population. The underreporting of cases and deaths, coupled with the government's aggressive stance against foreign interference, added to the growing list of criticisms. Lastly, the decision to prioritize geopolitical concerns over public health was met with disapproval. At a time when global cooperation was needed to combat the virus, Russia was seen as stirring up tensions with its aggressive foreign policy. This was evident in Putin's warning to foreign powers against crossing Russia's red lines, which was viewed as a distraction from the health crisis at hand. The resulting public outcry and international criticism marked a turning point in Russia's pandemic response. And while the pandemic raged on, geopolitical tensions were escalating. In the midst of an unprecedented global health crisis, the world stage was far from serene, with political undercurrents threatening to tip the balance of power. All eyes were on Russia, a country already under the microscope due to its handling of the pandemic. Vladimir Putin, Russia's indomitable leader, faced a unique challenge. On one side, he had to manage the internal crisis brought on by COVID-19. On the other, he had to navigate the treacherous waters of international politics, where every move was scrutinized and any misstep could spark a global conflict. The rift between Russia and the West deepened over several issues, such as the jailing of Kremlin critic Alexei Navalny and the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. Putin's stern warning to foreign powers against crossing Russia's red lines was a clear indication of the rising tension. Meanwhile, Russia's relationship with the United States was also fraught. Despite President Joe Biden's commendable efforts to rally support for Ukraine against Russian aggression, the handling of this conflict became a subject of criticism. The United States, along with many Western nations, viewed Russia's actions as provocative and destabilizing. These geopolitical tensions had a profound impact on Russia's pandemic response. The country had to juggle its healthcare crisis with the need to maintain a strong international presence. Any perceived weakness could be exploited by adversaries, adding another layer of complexity to the management of the pandemic. In a world where politics often takes precedence over public health, the handling of these issues became a tightrope walk for Putin's government. The need to protect national interests while ensuring the well-being of the Russian people was a delicate balancing act, one that was closely watched by both allies and adversaries. The handling of these geopolitical tensions further complicated Russia's pandemic response. As the dust began to settle, the criticisms of Putin's handling of the pandemic became more pronounced. In the aftermath of the peak of the pandemic, Putin's government faced a barrage of criticisms. Critics argued that the severity of the virus was downplayed, with political concerns seemingly prioritized over public health. This approach was seen by many as a significant oversight, leading to public health consequences that could have been mitigated with a more proactive response. The Russian administration's response to COVID-19 was viewed by some as a reflection of a broader pattern of governance, where the government's image and international standing often appeared to take precedence over the well-being of the populace. This criticism was not confined to the borders of Russia. International observers, too, voiced their concerns over the Kremlin's handling of the crisis. Public health experts argued that the Russian government's response to the pandemic had not only health implications, but also political repercussions. The perceived downplaying of the virus and the prioritization of political considerations over health measures led to a loss of public trust in the government's ability to handle crises. On top of the public health criticisms, Putin's government also faced political backlash. The handling of the pandemic was seen by many as symptomatic of a larger issue: the government's approach to governance and crisis management. Critics argued that the administration's handling of the pandemic mirrored its approach to other issues, such as the conflict in Ukraine and domestic political dissent. In the end, the criticisms of Putin's government over its handling of the pandemic were not just about public health. They were also about the broader issues of governance, accountability, and the management of crises. The pandemic became a prism through which the world could scrutinize and critique the workings of Putin's government. These criticisms underscore the challenges of managing a public health crisis amidst broader geopolitical tensions. So, what can we draw from Putin's handling of the COVID-19 pandemic? As we've explored throughout this video, it's a narrative of challenge and controversy, punctuated by geopolitical tensions. On the one hand, Putin's administration was faced with an unprecedented global health crisis. The early days of the pandemic were marked by uncertainty, as leaders worldwide scrambled to respond to the rapidly evolving situation. In this context, Putin's government undertook a series of controversial decisions, which critics argue prioritized political concerns over public health. The pandemic's progression was further complicated by existing geopolitical tensions, most notably the escalating conflict with Ukraine and strained relationships with the West. These tensions added a layer of complexity to Russia's pandemic response, highlighting the intricate interplay between public health and international politics. The criticisms Putin's government faced underscore the aftermath of these decisions. Accusations of downplaying the virus's severity and perceived inadequacies in public health prioritization have marked the public discourse. From this, we learn that managing a public health crisis is a complex task that extends beyond health measures alone. It's a delicate balancing act, requiring leaders to navigate the murky waters of international relations, domestic politics, and public sentiment, all while striving to protect public health. As we continue to navigate our way through this global crisis, the actions of world leaders like Putin offer valuable insights into the complexities of pandemic management.